never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion. Got my statement, and I'm reading it slow so I can understand it fully. Appreciate my standing, go out of this world and right on time. Oh, never in my life have I seen the sky light up like this. I'm far away from Earth and I wanna know if you exist. Mission control, do you read me? Send me my coordinates lately. Mission control, am I drifting? Tie me to someone who will love me, yeah. Wait, I think I'll last a bit longer. Find another reason to breathe this air.
Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Happy Friday to everybody out there, and we are right at about 24 hours away from the beginning of college football season. It all depends on when exactly you watch this video here on this Friday, and we're going to talk some college football coming up here in a couple of minutes. But first, for the second straight day, I have to report some sad news. Now, I don't like to report sad news, and that's why I try to be funny when I can, be serious when I can't be funny, but be funny when I can, and be positive. And I always sign off by telling you to tell your friends and family how much you love them, because you just never know. And I don't try to be Inside Edition or Hard Copy or Entertainment Tonight or any of those shows and report every single death that happens, because there's deaths all over the world just about every day. But I do feel like, since this is a sports and wrestling channel, that the deaths that are involved in some way in sports or wrestling, I should at least acknowledge. And yesterday we had to talk about Terry Funk. Today we have to talk about Wyndham Rotunda. Now, Terry Funk was 79 years old, but Wyndham Rotunda was only 36. And that just goes to show that you never know. 36 is actually younger than I am. But Wyndham Rotunda was the real name of Bray Wyatt. Now, of course, he broke in to WWE years and years ago as a young man, as Husky Harris, when he was part of the Nexus years and years and years ago. But he was more famously known as Bray Wyatt. Now, he was on his second marriage. He was married to former WWE ring announcer JoJo. And 36 years old. It happened unexpectedly yesterday. Nobody knows as of yet exactly what happened. But Wyndham Rotunda was the older brother of Taylor Rotunda, who was better known as Bo Dallas. And they're both the sons of Mike Rotunda, who wrestled for a while as Mike Rotunda, but he also wrestled as Irwin R. Shyster, Michael Wall Street, and VK Wall Street. They also had a sister that at one time was going to be a wrestler, but she changed her mind. But his name was Wyndham Rotunda because his daddy, Mike, and Barry Windham are best friends. So, in honor of Barry Windham, Mike named his son Wyndham, but he was better known as Bray Wyatt. Passed away again at the age of 36 years old. So you just never know. And that's why I try to encourage you to tell everybody you know how much you love them, and stay away from the drama and the hatred, because you just never know. So thoughts and prayers go out to Wyndham Rotunda, better known as Bray Wyatt, and his family at this time. But on to some college football talk, and then later on, I'm going to talk some NFL for a couple of minutes. But first, I said here on the channel a few weeks back that I was going to try my best to give you my predictions on each conference before the season started. And even though the season does start tomorrow, I could probably do this sometime next week because none of the teams that play tomorrow are going to factor into my decision in the conferences in any way. But I'll go ahead and do it now. That way I can officially say I got it in before the football season started. And in each Power 5 conference, I have who I think will win the conference. A lot of them won't surprise you, but a couple of them might. And this is just me trying to be different instead of just going with chalk in every conference because that's boring. But in the ACC, I'll go with Clemson. I think the two best teams are Clemson and Florida State. But if Florida State couldn't beat Clemson the last 2 years, when Clemson's offense was average at best, you're just not going to make me believe that all of a sudden the Clemson offense gets better and Florida State's going to beat them. I just don't believe that. But there is another team in the ACC that I think is going to be way better than expected, and I'll talk about that coming up here in a couple of minutes. In the Big 12, to me, the Big 12 shouldn't even be an argument for anybody else except for Texas Tech. I believe Texas wins the conference, but we'll talk more about Texas Tech coming up here in a couple of minutes. But I got Clemson in the ACC and Texas in the Big 12, and if Texas gets past Alabama, I just don't see where they lose. In the Big 10, I'm going to go with Ohio State. This was the hardest one to pick for me. Not in the other side. I think the conference championship game is going to be Ohio State and Wisconsin. If the other side of the conference is anybody besides Wisconsin or Iowa, I'll be stunned. But Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State all play in the same side. And I've said before here on the channel, talking about all this preseason college football talk, that I think Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan are all three going to beat each other. So I think all three teams go 11-1, but somebody has to win the conference. And in that case, I honestly, really, truly don't know what the tiebreaker is going to be when this team beats this team, and this team beats this team, but this team beat this team. So I'll just say that since Ohio State and Michigan played the last week of the regular season, and I think Ohio State's going to beat Michigan, I think Ohio State will finish the highest ranked of the three, and I'll say that gives them tiebreaker. Really, I honestly don't know who would win that side of the conference in that scenario. In the Pac-12, it's probably the one that's going to shock some people, but I'm not going with USC. I just don't trust Lincoln Riley on defense. There's too many times I've heard people talk about a Lincoln Riley coach team is going to improve on defense, and then the season starts and I watch them and I just don't see it. To me, Lincoln Riley's the kind of coach to where if his defense is good, that's great. But he doesn't go into a game or a season thinking his defense needs to be good. To me, he seems like the kind of coach that says, my defense being good is a cherry on top. Because if we give up 35, that's okay. We'll score 40. But as good as the Huskies were last year on offense, and they brought back just about every big-time player, I think Washington beats USC, and I think Washington wins the Pac-12. And then the SEC, to me, is down to two teams. That's LSU and Georgia. If anybody else is there for the conference title game, I'll be surprised. I think it's LSU in the West. I think it's Georgia in the East. And just because Georgia's won it 2 straight years, I'll go with LSU just to be different. But honestly, if Georgia wins it again, it wouldn't surprise me at all. But those are my Power 5 conference winners: Clemson, LSU, Texas, Ohio State, and Washington. And now I want to talk about 5 teams that I think will be better than expected. I've already mentioned a couple of them when I was talking about the conferences, but these are teams that I'm not saying they're going to finish top 5, top 10, maybe not even top 15, but I think they're going to be way better than expected. And if they sneak up and win a game they shouldn't win, it's not going to surprise me at all. But most of these teams, if you look at the preseason and go by win-loss totals, most of these teams are picked to win 6 or 7 games, and I think they're all going to exceed that. One is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has won 20 games the last 2 years, and there ain't but 5 teams in America who have won more than 20 games the last 2 years. But for some reason, Pat Narduzzi never gets any credit. Pittsburgh exceeds expectations every year. I don't expect anything different this year. We can go into a season and I can watch Pittsburgh play and not know one player on their defensive line, but I can promise you when the season starts, their defensive line is going to be fine. Same way in the secondary, and Pat Narduzzi loves to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball. And this year they've added Boston College transfer Phil Jurkovec at quarterback. He likes to run the ball too. So Pittsburgh is picked to win 6 or 7 games. I think they'll win 8 or 9. And don't be surprised if they win a game somewhere that you wouldn't expect them to win. Missouri's another one. I'm not saying Missouri's going to threaten for the SEC because they're not, but I actually think Missouri has a chance to be better than expected this year. And another one is Louisville. If you look at Louisville's schedule, the best 2 teams in the ACC are Clemson and Florida State, and Louisville doesn't play either one of them. And North Carolina, you can make an argument they're the 3rd best team in the conference. Louisville don't play them either. So they don't play Clemson or Florida State or North Carolina, and their offense is going to be really explosive. So I expect Louisville to be better than expected this year. And Texas Tech is another one. If Texas doesn't win the Big 12, it'll be Texas Tech. Now, Texas Tech, depending on what poll you look at, they're ranked this year 23rd, 24th, 25th, somewhere along in there. But they're better than that. They'll be a 9 or 10 win team, and I think their head coach is a star in the making. And the final team is Washington State. But this is a team that you're going to have to watch to actually see how good they are, because honestly, really, truly, the Pac-12 might be the best conference in America this year. You're going to have Oregon, Oregon State, USC, Washington, and UCLA and Utah that are all going to be phenomenal football teams. So Washington State might be 7-5, and you look at their record and you'll say, well, they're not that good. But with a schedule like they're going to face, 7-5 is actually not bad. But Wazoo is one of those teams that nobody ever talks about. But despite their schedule, they're going to have a pretty good season. And lastly, I want to talk some NFL for a minute. I have not made any preseason predictions on the NFL. I might make a couple of more before the season starts. We know it starts a week after week 1 in college football, so it starts 2 weeks after college football, since we have week 0 tomorrow. But I want to talk some Atlanta Falcons for a minute, because the division they play in is absolute garbage, and I thought, since it sucks so bad, the Falcons could win 9 games, and that might be enough to win the conference or the division. But then when I saw their schedule, I said, wait a minute, 9 wins might win the division, but they've got a chance to be a double-digit win team. They open up the season September the 10th against the Panthers. Then they play the Packers on the 17th, the Lions on the 24th. Then on October the 1st, they play the Jacksonville Jaguars at 9:30 a.m. for all you early risers. October the 8th, they play the Houston Texans. On the 15th, they play the Commanders. On the 22nd, they play the Tampa Bay We Suck Out Loud Buccaneers. Halloween weekend on the 29th, they play the Tennessee Titans. Moving into November, week number 9, they play the Minnesota Vikings. On the 12th, they play the Cardinals. And then they're off in week number 11. Come back Thanksgiving weekend on the 26th, they play the New Orleans Saints. Moving into December now, on the 3rd, they play the Jets. On the 10th, they play the Buccaneers. On the 17th, the Panthers. Christmas Eve, they play the Indianapolis Colts. New Year's Eve, they play the Chicago Bears. And they wrap up the season with the New Orleans Saints in January of 2024 on January the 7th. Now, looking over their schedule, I think the Texans are terrible, so I expect the Falcons to win that game. The Commanders, I think, are going to be average at best. The Falcons beat them. They play the Bucks twice. There's no reason why they shouldn't beat the Bucks both games. They play the Panthers twice. I think they'll split with them. They play the Saints twice. They split with them. That gives them 6 wins, and I think they're also going to beat the Green Bay Packers, although I do believe the Packers are going to be better than expected this year. Everybody thinks that Aaron Rodgers leaving hurts them, but Aaron Rodgers didn't have one 300-yard passing game last year. So I think them losing Aaron Rodgers is not going to affect them. But they beat the Packers. I think they also beat the Titans, and they're also going to beat the Cardinals, and they're going to beat the Jets. So to me, the Falcons have a chance to be a 10-win team. And unless one of the other teams in that division is way better than expected, 10 wins might win the division. If they can get to 11, definitely they win it. But 10 is questionable. I think the Saints are going to be better than people think they're going to be, but I don't know if they're going to win 11 or 12 games. But I think the Panthers show improvement with Bryce Young. But I think if the Bucks win 5 games, that's a good season. They've got Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield battling for the starting quarterback position. Any thoughts on any of this, please feel free to let me know. Homes for Our Troops is a publicly funded 501c nonprofit organization that builds and donates specially adapted custom homes nationwide for severely injured post 9/11 veterans. Since the 2004 inception, nearly 90 cents of every dollar spent has gone directly to our program services for veterans. Visit at hfotusa.org. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. Taylor Swift is immune to vampires. They know she has bad blood. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3.